Welcome to the Holistic Physician Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jessica Singh. This podcast explores physician health, well-being, and fulfillment, embracing all aspects of the human experience. Just as in medicine, where a single interaction can transform a life, this podcast is grounded on the belief that each coaching conversation has the power to inspire, heal, and bring about meaningful change. Dr. Shanda McManus is a family medicine physician, speaker, and author. She is an emerging voice on grief, race, and what medicine costs the people who practice it. Dr. McManus was born and raised in Philadelphia. She received her BA in English Literature from the University of Pennsylvania and her Doctor of Medicine from Thomas Jefferson Medical College. Dr. McManus was a 2021 PEN America Emerging Voices Fellow in Creative Nonfiction and a 2023 Baldwin for the Arts Fellow. Her writing has appeared in Bellevue Literary Review and other literary journals. She is an assistant professor of clinical medicine at Hackensack Meridian School of Medicine, where she teaches narrative medicine and humanism. She publishes Weatherproof, a Substack newsletter on Black women's health and healing. Her debut memoir, Brother Epistles, a sister's memoir, published with Split Lip Press, June 2026, began not as a book, but as an act of reconnection with her brother Monir, who was murdered in 1992 when she was a first-year medical student. Dr. McManus believes storytelling is its own kind of medicine. Welcome so much, Dr. Shanda McManus. It's so wonderful to have you here.
Oh, thanks for inviting me into this beautiful space and giving me a chance to share.
Sometimes I wonder when you read physicians' bios, especially such as yourself, there's so much that gets embodied into these tiny little paragraphs. And you know that's only the highlights of what your life journey has been. So just to start, if you'd like to share just key experiences or turning points in your life that led you to the work you do today.
Yeah, I'd be happy to share. I think the most pivotal thing is I lost my mother to ovarian cancer when I was 14. And between the ages of 10 and 14, I was like her main source of support. I learned how to do the colostomy bag, the IV feedings. I went to the electric company. I learned to sign checks and just things in my family. It ended up me having a lot of that experiences. So I think that really somehow created a desire in me to be a physician because I saw how much impact they had for my mom. There are no doctors in my family. There were no college graduates in my family. So my mom had one oncologist and he just gave her so much hope. His name was Dr. Idicula. And I really saw that like when she talked to him or had a visit, she was just lit up from within. And tragically, he died in a car accident midway through her care. And she got another physician, and I think he wasn't that. He wasn't empathetic or compassionate. This was in the 80s where we still didn't treat cancer pain adequately. And it was just such a contrast. And I think that really became my philosophy as a physician to give care, to make space for people, because even if you don't cure someone, you can heal. And I think that was really very pivotal to bring me to this point today. And like I said, I grew up in the inner city, North Philadelphia. My grandmother was also a very fundamental, foundational piece, that unconditional love and someone who's just like, you're valuable just because you exist. And I carry that with me today. And I think having received that love, I know how important it is for other people to have that support in their lives. Yeah, so that is just a little taste of kind of what shaped me and who shaped me. My mother, my grandmother really were foundational in that.
It's incredible to have such, I think one of the things that often gets overlooked in medicine is the life experiences that we bring and carry. And not even just our lives, but our heritage, our culture, all of this perspective that gets brought into then our educational degrees and everything that makes us into medicine. And so I know I'm curious as to see how this ended up shaping your work today too, as well, with the grief and all the work that you do. And it's interesting because when you have experiences like that so young, I couldn't imagine what that was like for you while you were caring for your mother, to have a doctor that you loved, especially in college, was caring for her, and then to have the doctor pass away so tragically. So many different elements. And I'm wondering, what about those experiences stayed with you and as you got older and made the decision to go to medical school, residency, and how you viewed grief as a physician?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting because I think initially I lost my mom when I was 14, then my grandmom when I was 17. She was killed in a car accident after we went to live with her, my brother and I. And then I was carrying that, and then my first semester in medical school, I lose my brother to homicide, right? And it happened, it was Christmas Eve, and by January 3rd, I was back in school. And so I had this heavy backpack of grief that I didn't reflect on, I didn't integrate, I just pushed it down and away because I had this feeling like I didn't have space to grieve, or I couldn't take time for that. And if I got off the train of medical school or took a breath, I might never get back on. And also, as a Black woman, I already felt like, hey, maybe I don't belong here. And any show of weakness was not welcomed when I was training. And I still think that's the case today, allowing for doctors to be human, right? The experience of grief is very human, and loss and processing loss. But I felt like at the time, there was no space for that. So I say this in my book, but I put like a tourniquet on all of that. And so you know how tourniquets work. They're not supposed to be long term, right? They're just supposed to buy you some time. And it wasn't until like decades later that I was even able to turn and look at that grief. And I think that for me, it was coming to a place in my life where I had security, emotionally, psychologically, the necessities of life, that I felt like, okay, it might be safe now to turn and look. And I'm so glad I did, because what I realized is that I hadn't been all that I could be, because I had those essential parts of self, that grief experience, that I didn't integrate. So yes, I was a wife, I was a mother, I was a practicing doctor. Seemed like everything was okay, but I wasn't everything. I hadn't brought my whole self, right? And I think after I was able to go in and claim my grief, I became more in every facet of my life.
What would you like to acknowledge for yourself about how you carry that backpack of grief, or how you wore that tourniquet for all those years?
Yeah, I really have like a compassion and empathy for that young woman, that girl that I was, that didn't have that space. And I really, I'm sharing now because I don't want anybody else to feel like they can't claim their grief while they're training to be a doctor, while they're a resident, while they're an attending, or really any sort of professional. Please do it. Please take that space for yourself, because the medicine, the school, the work, all of that will be there. And when you come back to it, you'll be more. You will be more in touch with your own humanity. So when you encounter patients, you encounter family members, you're enlarged with that pain and with that hurt, right? So that's why I'm sharing, because I think that sometimes doctors are seen as superhuman, meaning above the human experiences of loss and grief, and we are not. I'm sure you've heard the statistics that doctors have some of the highest suicide rates, highest divorce rates of any professional, and why is that, right? And I think it's things like this where we sometimes don't have the space to claim all of our human emotions and experiences.
It's so well said. And even as you're speaking, I think just anyone listening who's gone through it, you feel the somatic constriction in your body, and then relief when you talk about space. Thank you for giving that advice, or what you would say to yourself, to that young woman at that time. For those who may be in medical school or residency, going through grief, I guess, does anything come to mind as to how, if you had your time again, you would have done things differently?
What I think is, when that happened over the Christmas holiday, I wish I had sought out support within the medical school, like directly, instead of hiding the whole thing or not really speaking about it. I had a classmate who lived next door to me in my apartment building, and he saw me one day on the elevator and he said, "You seem just like really depressed and sad." And I shrugged him off and went into my apartment. So I wish I had taken that extension of someone seeing me and leaning into that a little bit. I could have sought out, been more proactive, but I just didn't have any initiative to do that. I needed someone above me to see it and pull me towards it. So I wish that at the time there had been more resources that were really underscored for me. I'm not saying my medical school didn't have it, but it wasn't really promoted, or there weren't built-in wellness checks, right? Where you have some sort of advisor that's really just supposed to check in with you personally. Like, how are you doing? So that would really be my wish for students and trainees to have access to that "how are you" advisor, and having that built in to the training.
I'm so glad you mentioned that for medical education, especially because at all medical schools we have advisors who do the check, like are you completing your exams? Are you passing your rotations? All of that stuff. And then you miss this elephant in the room. Yeah. And so now as faculty, how do you do things differently?
Well, it's interesting. At my medical school, I teach in a course called Human Dimension, and it's really a great course that goes through all 3 years because we have an accelerated schedule for our students. And I am with a group of 8 students through their whole time at the medical school. So we have small groups. The topics are everything related to medicine outside of the biological sciences. So palliative care, substance use, environmental impact, narrative medicine. And so I really get a chance to meet with these students about twice a month and talk about those things, but also get to know them as people and make myself available. Hey, if there's something, anything, you can come to me and I will be checking in on you. And I think it's just really a great opportunity to, one, connect with these bright young students, but also acknowledge that medical school is hard. It is really hard, personally, physically, intellectually, and having someone who's been through it who can say, "I know it's hard." And you can acknowledge that it's hard, and you can also acknowledge when you need support. Or maybe you need a break because of a situation that's happening in your life, and you can come back from that break and get back on your train and not lose anything. So yeah, that's what I try to bring into med ed.
What a gift it is to have that space.
Yeah.
And I know you were talking about how things were when you were in training and how they're still probably like that at many institutions across the United States, let alone the world.
Yep.
And so I'm curious as to know what gaps you've experienced and seen commonly in medical education with respect to grief and what needs to be filled.
Yeah, I think that a gap I see is, I think when students come to medical school, there should be some sort of grief inventory. There should be a system of saying, what are our students bringing in with them? And maybe they haven't processed, or they haven't had the tools, and how can we match them with the tools that they need from day one? You know, when I started medical school, I had lost my mother and my grandmother. What if there was built-in intake and support, so there was someone aware of that? Maybe I could have already been in some sort of grief counseling or how to manage when then I encountered another loss, right? So I think that grief inventory, and also teaching our students in the curriculum how to deal with grief, their own and the grief of their patients and loss, and really like do some more than the 5 stages of grief. Like I got that lecture in medical school, but there's so much more to grief than that. And I think it's been very abbreviated and kind of, okay, people have 5 stages, just so you know. But it's so much more than that. I think grief, when you've experienced it, it threads through your whole life. It spirals, it comes back, it loops. And I can say, honestly, it's never over. It's not over. And I think that there needs to be more teaching on that so students and trainees can tend to themselves and then tend to their patients in a much more holistic, informed, empathetic, and compassionate way. And then on the floors, the first time a patient dies, or God forbid, I remember being an intern, my first rotation was the ICU, and the first day, a woman passes away, and the nurse is like, okay, you have to go pronounce her. And I was like, what's that mean? What do you do? Don't unplug anything. And there was someone to walk me through those steps, but not someone to walk me to, now you got to go down the hall and tell her children and how to do that. And also, after you do that, maybe you have someone to talk to. How was that? How do you feel? What might you do differently next time? To give you some space before you go to the next case and the next patient and the next, because you get callous if you don't integrate that grief you encounter so often as a physician. And I'm sure a lot of patients have had that experience where the doctor didn't even seem to care when they told me my loved one passed away. And so I think that's a disconnect, and where we can do better in medicine, equipping trainees, residents, and ourselves.
It's so important and so tricky, like you mentioned, because I'm curious to know, you said you had, in hindsight, waited until certain elements of your life were safe and stable before you even allowed yourself to go there. Mm-hmm. And you accomplished this extraordinary thing along the way before even tapping into that. Mm-hmm. And as you're talking about doing this for physicians in training, so many attendings, right? The ones of us who didn't get this when we were training, it's like that callous almost. It's like, it's so hard, because one of the things that we understand more and more as we get through the system is that it's the system that brings these characteristics. Mm-hmm. We have to survive. We have to function in such a way to be able to treat the next patient. Yep. How do you do that if you let yourself really process the emotions for each one? I don't know if I've figured out the answer yet or seen anyone who has, to be honest with you, because how do you see death and not have it change you at that level?
Yeah. I think it's really like, that's something to think about. What I think is an underutilized way in is the creative pursuits. Like for me, it was writing, and taking that space to write, to go in, allowed for all those ill-defined feelings. I felt some type of way. And through writing, I was able to acknowledge it and think about it and look at the shape of that thing. And I think music is a way to do that for some people. A lot of people play instruments. I have another physician friend. She does watercolor. And I think the arts really allow space for processing all the stuff that we take on in medicine. I think we need more of that. We need physicians to tap into whatever that side of them that gives space to expression, to kind of cope with all those feelings.
It's such an amazing point to bring out about the arts, because there's an element of psychological safety in the way these spaces are created, about being able to express without editing or without judgment. And it seems so simple, but it's something that we don't often have in medicine unless we're aware of it and create it.
Yeah, and I think that like we all in medicine can do more in the line of making those spaces available. What if in the hospital there was like a creative room for the docs to go in, where you could draw, where you could write, where you could sit in a cozy chair bundled with the lights low, just a space created within these spaces where we work.
Absolutely. I'm curious, how did you find narrative medicine, and what was that process like for you? For those who haven't yet had the pleasure of reading your book, would you like to share a little bit more about it?
Yeah, in college I was an English major, but I wasn't a creative writing major. It was literature because I've always loved to read. That was like a sanctuary for me. Later in my life, I saw an advertisement for a community writing class, and then that was the beginning of it for me. I just started writing and reflecting, and it was just a great fit for me. And then I heard about narrative medicine, and I would have never thought that these two interests, medicine and writing, could come together in any meaningful way. Dr. Rita Sharon out of Columbia, she pioneered this discipline of narrative medicine, which really is, I think if you boil it down to its essence, is the use of story in healthcare, right? So you can use it to take care of patients, you can use it to take care of yourself, right? I was just blown away when I saw that, hey, this discipline, these are two things that I love, right? I can put them together because really when you think about it, medicine is about stories, right? Patients come in and they tell you a story. And making space for that story is what good doctors do. And then we help build a new story together with our patients. And I think that really seeing that link was really inspiring and something that I just felt like, wow, if I had known this when I was in medical school, that you could knit these things together, I would have just been so excited, like I'm excited now about it.
I feel the warmth and joy. Thank you for sharing about it. Because even though it's growing in popularity, who knows who you may reach just by talking about it. So thank you.
Yeah.
And you had mentioned something earlier which was so important. The point about grief not being like a one-time thing and how it keeps coming. And when you allowed yourself to go there, especially with respect to your brother, what did you experience, I guess, about how grief shows up?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because I think before I consciously turned towards the grief, it showed up in these bouts of depression and just a feeling sometimes of being a little disconnected or removed from people that I really love. But there was something, a withholding that happened that I can see in retrospect was unprocessed feelings about grief and loss. And I think for me, in writing this book, it's a series of letters that I write to my brother, right? And so the shape of the book is a spiral. And I go through the point of the murder, but I go in the past and in my future now without my brother. And that's really how grief manifests, right? Because we have this person and we have these experiences with them, right? But then that person dies and we go forward, but there's an empty space in our forward life where that person was, right? And so that's also a part of the experience and part of the relationship that I think you still can have beyond. You're still connected to those you love, even when they pass on. And I think that the writing allowed me to resurrect that connection and to feel like, once again, my brother's a part of my life and a part of me. Even though in body he's not here, there's still some sharing that gets done and revisiting and remembering and thoughts in and around that.
It's so inspiring to read a book with that heart, to know that's his way of honoring his life with you, his legacy, and to carry him with you in your heart. It's incredible. It's also interesting, too, because as a physician, paramedics, police officers, there are a handful of people in this world that get to witness death the way physicians do. And I mean, at the frequency that physicians do. And yet, like you mentioned, there's this catch-22 about how we often don't take the space or aren't given the space to process.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, because it's also, in terms of culture, like the time it took you to write the book, yes, it took time to make that space for yourself, to be given that space for yourself. So many different cultures, so many different funeral rituals. My parents grew up in India, and so if someone passes away, it's like, okay, if I went back to where I was in residency and be like, hey, I'm taking 14 days off, I still feel a little constriction talking about it, but I think what I would like to tell myself back then is just take the FML, take the time you need for the grief. And it's also, I can't imagine how difficult it was for you, because there's anticipated grief and the grief that comes before death, and then from trauma, just to process what happened when you don't expect it at all, like for your brother.
Yeah, and I think that's so important. If I have one message, take the space. The work will be there. How different would it have been if I could have even had a month to just be? And I was really depressed. When I went back to school, it was gray, it was cold. I felt so alone. The circumstances of the death were one where no one likes to talk about death anyway, but death related to murder, you really don't want to talk about that. And it was really isolating, and it was hard. So I would encourage, and ritual is important, right? And I think here in the West, hey, time to move on. You did this and this, and in some cultures, there's ritual for a year, or there's a way that you dress. So everyone knows you're in this tender space of grief, and there's space given to it within the culture and the support. So I think here in the U.S., we could take a note from some of those places, because the thing is, grief is going to show up. So how about we give it space to show up in a way that can be a balm, could be a healing thing, instead of something that kind of eats you up and pulls you down from within.
Absolutely. And as you talk about the rituals and the grief, the thing that's coming, especially as I'm hearing you now talk so calmly and so confidently about everything, is spirituality. What drove you? What inner beliefs carried you through? This was so much to carry by yourself.
It's interesting because I talk a little bit about this in the book. I had a little bit of anger. I'm raised in the Christian tradition, and it felt really unfair. I felt like I had my, cup of bad luck. And then for this to happen, and my brother and I were really close. We're only 18 months apart. And the griefs I had before I lost him, my mother and grandmother, he shared that completely with me, right? Because it's also his mother, his grandmother. But now when I lose him, I'm by myself, right? I don't have that. So I think for me, there was a little bit of God, you are being unfair. And I think through writing this book and also talking to people, there's a lot of people who have stories of quote unquote unfair loss and griefs that they carry. And I think I found kind of solace in hearing other people. And I'm not the only one, even among physicians who've lost people during training and had no time or space. So I think that has given me some, peace about it in the spiritual sense. I still don't understand it, but I do feel like I can accept it because there's so many other people who've had just what you would say, this is unfair.
And it's hard because you see it so frequently in patients, and then when it happens to us, it's we're just as everyone else.
Yeah, we're human, and I think that that's so important for physicians to claim for themselves, claim your humanness, because it just will make you a better doctor, but also a better person in your own life, a better daughter, a better partner, all of those things, a better parent, if you're able to stay close and hold on to your humanness, even when it's painful and it's hurt.
And even when sometimes you have RVUs and you're expected to see a certain number of patients a day, or it doesn't matter if it cuts into, but it's easy for me to say because I'm no longer in that system. But even when I was it's just defining those values for yourself.
Yeah, and how you want to show up in your own life and how you want to be whole, right? And we're all striving to being more whole. And I think taking those space and those moments are really critical to that.
Thank you. I'm just going to ask for listeners, do you have a takeaway? I know we've covered a lot of ground today.
I think my takeaway is take space for yourself and all the emotions and pain you may be carrying or you may encounter. Take a moment and claim it. Claim it. Claim your humanness, because it's what makes you different from the AI doctor, okay? So claim it and make a space for yourself, even when it's not given.
So well said. And one of my biggest takeaways from listening to you is one of the points you made also about how talking to other people helped. Just for anyone, that's one of the reasons why I love these conversations. You don't often get to have this human conversation with someone such as yourself who has such beautiful, rich, intense life experience. And I just want to say thank you again for the courage to share. It just helps so many people, because then you also see yourself and realize you're not alone.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And for listeners, Dr. McManus's book will be in the show notes, as well as a link to her Substack. So, yes.
Yes, here's the corner. This is great. I love the cover. So, yes, I love for people to read, to hear the story for themselves.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Holistic Physician Coaching Podcast. This podcast is dedicated to making coaching more accessible and to support both physicians and those who coach them. Subscribe to access exclusive subscriber-only episodes, including physician coaching sessions, coaching debriefs, and coach mentoring sessions that offer valuable insights for professional development for coaches. Your support helps sustain this work. Subscribe and leave a thoughtful review at www.holisticphysiciancoachingpodcast.com. Sending you warmth and light.